In the earliest ages of the world, before maps were drawn and borders were carved, humanity lived beneath the vast open sky, guided only by the rhythms of nature. People moved like the seasons, following rivers, hunting herds, and seeking fertile lands. Yet within this wandering existence, a spark of something greater was beginning to flicker. An idea that would shape history forever: civilization. Along the banks of the great rivers, life slowly transformed. The Tigris and Euphrates in Mesopotamia carried rich silt that nourished the soil. Villages grew into towns, and towns into cities. Here, the first empire was born, not through conquest at first, but through organization. People learned to farm, to store grain, to build homes from sun-baked bricks. They created systems of writing to record their laws, prayers, and stories. The world was no longer wild and untamed. It was being shaped by human hands. In the city of Uruk, mighty walls rose toward the heavens. King Gilgamesh, part man and part legend, ruled with both strength and wisdom. His reign symbolized the birth of kingship itself. Under his rule, canals were dug, temples were built, and trade flourished. Yet even in this golden age, shadows lurked. Power, once tasted, was never easily surrendered. Rival cities began to challenge Uruk's dominance, setting the stage for endless conflict. Far to the west, along the Nile River, another great civilization was rising. Egypt emerged like a gift from the desert, its lifeblood flowing through the sacred waters of the Nile. Every year, the river flooded, bringing fertility to the land. The Egyptians saw this as a divine blessing from their gods. They built pyramids that touched the sky, monuments meant to defy time itself. Pharaohs ruled not just as kings, but as living gods, their word absolute and eternal. Meanwhile, in the Indus Valley, a highly advanced society was taking shape. Cities like Harappa and Mohenjo-daro were meticulously planned, with straight streets, drainage systems, and great public baths. Unlike other early empires, the Indus people left behind few signs of war. Their civilization thrived on trade, craftsmanship, and cooperation. Yet even this peaceful empire would one day vanish, swallowed by forces that historians still struggle to fully understand. Across the world, in the fertile valleys of China, the Yellow River gave birth to yet another ancient power. The Xia and later Shang dynasties rose, bringing with them bronze technology, intricate writing, and spiritual traditions that would influence Chinese culture for millennia. Kings ruled under the belief that they held the mandate of heaven, a divine right that could be lost if they became corrupt or unjust. As these civilizations grew, so did their ambitions. Cities turned into kingdoms, and kingdoms into empires. Armies were formed, walls were fortified, and leaders sought to expand their dominion beyond their original borders. Trade routes stretched across deserts and seas, linking distant lands in a web of commerce and cultural exchange. Yet beneath all this grandeur lay an undeniable truth. Every empire, no matter how powerful, was built on fragile foundations. Wealth bred greed. Power bred conflict. Unity slowly gave way to division. Even as the greatest civilizations reached their heights, the seeds of their eventual downfall were already being planted. Thus began the long and dramatic tale of human history, a cycle of rise and fall, glory and destruction, creation and collapse. This was only the beginning. As civilizations matured, the world entered an era where power was measured not by wisdom alone, but by the strength of armies and the vastness of territories. Empires no longer grew merely through prosperity and culture. They expanded through conquest, ambition, and warfare. This was the age when great leaders rose, some revered as visionaries, others feared as ruthless conquerors. In Mesopotamia, the balance of power shifted from city-states to mighty empires. The Akkadian Empire, led by Sargon the Great, became the first true empire in history. Born as a commoner, Sargon climbed to power through cunning, military brilliance, and sheer determination. He united the fractured cities of Mesopotamia under one rule, creating a centralized state that stretched across vast lands. His armies marched far and wide, bringing both order and terror wherever they went. Under his reign, trade flourished, languages blended, and governance became more structured. Yet, like all empires, the Akkadian Empire faced rebellion, famine, and internal strife. After Sargon's death, his successors struggled to maintain control, and eventually, the empire crumbled under its own weight. Further east, the Assyrians rose to dominance with an iron fist. Their empire was built on fear, discipline, and military innovation. Cities like Nineveh became centers of power and learning, home to grand palaces and massive libraries. Kings such as Ashurbanipal commanded vast armies equipped with iron weapons, siege machines, and ruthless tactics. The Assyrians perfected the art of warfare, crushing rebellions with brutal efficiency. Yet their cruelty earned them countless enemies. When internal revolts combined with external invasions, the once mighty Assyrian Empire collapsed in a dramatic fall. In Egypt, the new kingdom marked the peak of imperial power. Pharaohs like Thutmose III and Ramses II expanded Egypt's borders through military campaigns into Nubia, the Levant, and beyond. Massive temples were built at Karnak and Abu Simbel, celebrating divine kingship and military triumph. Egypt became a dominant force in the ancient world, rich in gold, art, and religious tradition. However, as power grew, so did corruption and political instability. Foreign invasions, economic decline, and weakened leadership gradually eroded Egypt's supremacy. Meanwhile, in the Indus Valley, after centuries of prosperity, the great cities mysteriously declined. Some historians believe climate change altered the course of rivers, depriving cities of water. Others suggest invasions or internal collapse. Whatever the cause, the once great Indus civilization faded into silence, leaving behind ruins and unanswered questions. In Persia, a new and remarkable empire emerged under Cyrus the Great. Unlike many conquerors before him, Cyrus ruled with tolerance and wisdom. He respected local religions, customs, and traditions, earning loyalty rather than fear. The Persian Empire stretched from India to the Mediterranean, connected by the Royal Road, one of the most advanced communication networks of the ancient world. Later rulers like Darius I expanded administration, built grand cities like Persepolis, and created a stable system of governance. Yet the empire's vast size made it vulnerable. Rebellions, court intrigues, and the relentless ambition of outsiders would eventually threaten its stability. To the west, in Greece, city-states like Athens and Sparta clashed in fierce rivalry. Though not a single empire in the traditional sense, Greek civilization profoundly shaped politics, philosophy, and warfare. Alexander the Great, a student of Aristotle, would later rise as one of history's greatest conquerors. In just over a decade, he defeated the Persian Empire, marched through Egypt, and reached the edges of India. His empire spread Greek culture, language, and ideas across 3 continents. Yet after his sudden death, his vast dominion fractured among his generals, proving that even the greatest empire could not outlive its creator. In China, the Zhou dynasty ruled for centuries under the concept of the mandate of heaven. But as central power weakened, China descended into the chaotic warring states period. Powerful kingdoms battled for supremacy, leading to innovation in warfare, philosophy, and governance. Eventually, the Qin dynasty rose, uniting China under Qin Shi Huang. He standardized writing, currency, and laws, and began construction of the Great Wall. His rule was efficient but harsh, and after his death, rebellion toppled the dynasty within years. Across all these lands, a common pattern emerged. Empires rose through strength, organization, and vision, but fell due to arrogance, corruption, internal division, and external threats. The ancient world was a stage of endless transformation, where glory and ruin walked hand in hand. As the great empires reached their zenith, unseen forces were already gathering, forces that would reshape the world once more. As the ancient world moved forward, empires no longer existed in isolation. Their destinies became intertwined through war, trade, diplomacy, and cultural exchange. This was the era of monumental clashes, legendary battles, and shifting balances of power, an age where the fate of entire civilizations could be decided on a single battlefield. In the West, the Mediterranean Sea became the heart of conflict and connection. The Phoenicians, master sailors and traders, built powerful city-states like Tyre and Carthage. Their ships traveled far beyond the known world, carrying goods, ideas, and influence. Carthage, in particular, grew into a vast maritime empire, dominating trade routes across North Africa, Spain, and the Western Mediterranean. Yet their growing power brought them into inevitable conflict with a rising force, Rome. Rome began as a small city-state on the Italian peninsula, but its ambition knew no limits. Through discipline, military organization, and political cunning, the Romans gradually expanded their control over neighboring territories. The Roman legions became the most feared fighting force of their time, known for their training, strategy, and unity. As Rome grew, it clashed with Carthage in the legendary Punic Wars. The Carthaginian general Hannibal famously crossed the Alps with war elephants, delivering crushing defeats to Rome. Yet despite his brilliance, Rome endured, rebuilt, and ultimately destroyed Carthage in a devastating final war. From its ashes, Rome emerged as the dominant power of the Western world. Meanwhile, in the East, the legacy of Alexander the Great continued to shape history. After his death, his empire was divided among his generals, creating powerful Hellenistic kingdoms such as the Seleucid Empire in Persia and the Ptolemaic dynasty in Egypt. Greek culture blended with local traditions, producing a rich fusion of art, science, and philosophy. Cities like Alexandria became centers of knowledge, home to the Great Library, where scholars from across the world gathered to study astronomy, mathematics, medicine, and literature. Yet these successor states were plagued by internal rivalries and constant warfare, weakening them over time. In Persia, after Alexander's conquest, the once great Achaemenid Empire had fallen. But Persian power was reborn in the form of the Parthian Empire. The Parthians became Rome's greatest eastern rival, mastering cavalry warfare and defending their lands with fierce determination. Their skilled horse archers struck swiftly and disappeared just as quickly, frustrating Roman armies for centuries. Battles like Carrhae proved that Rome was not invincible. The ancient world now stood divided between two superpowers, Rome in the west and Parthia in the east. In India, after the decline of the Indus civilization, new powers arose. The Mauryan Empire, founded by Chandragupta Maurya, unified much of the Indian subcontinent. His grandson, Ashoka the Great, expanded the empire through warfare but later embraced Buddhism after witnessing the horrors of battle. He promoted peace, morality, and religious tolerance, spreading Buddhist teachings across Asia. Under Ashoka, India flourished culturally and spiritually, yet after his death, the empire weakened and fragmented into smaller kingdoms. In China, after centuries of chaos, the Han dynasty rose to power following the fall of the Qin. The Han emperors strengthened central authority, expanded territory, and established the famous Silk Road, a vast network of trade routes linking China with Central Asia, Persia, and Rome. Silk, spices, paper, and ideas traveled across deserts and mountains, connecting distant civilizations in ways never seen before. The Han era became a golden age of Chinese culture, science, and governance. Yet like all great empires, corruption, rebellion, and political instability eventually eroded its strength. Across Africa, the Kingdom of Kush in Nubia emerged as a powerful civilization south of Egypt. At times, Kush even conquered and ruled Egypt, blending their cultures and traditions. Their cities flourished with trade, ironworking, and monumental architecture. Farther west, early states and kingdoms began to form, laying the foundations for future African empires. Throughout this vast and turbulent world, a clear pattern emerged. Empires were built through conquest, unity, and innovation, but they were torn apart by greed, rebellion, and overexpansion. The more powerful they became, the more fragile they grew. Yet even as ancient empires fought, traded, and competed, something greater was slowly taking shape beneath the surface. A transformation that would change not just politics, but religion, culture, and the very identity of the ancient world. The stage was set for the final dramatic acts in the story of the greatest ancient empires. As the greatest empires of the ancient world reached their peak, an invisible shift began to take place beneath the surface of history. Power was no longer defined only by armies and territory. It was increasingly shaped by religion, culture, economics, and the movement of peoples. This was the beginning of the twilight of the ancient world, where old systems trembled and new forces prepared to rise. In Rome, the empire had grown to an almost unimaginable size. From the windswept plains of Britain to the deserts of Arabia, from the forests of Germania to the shores of North Africa, Roman rule stretched across the known world. Roads paved with stone connected distant provinces. Aqueducts carried water into magnificent cities. The Colosseum stood as a symbol of Roman grandeur, where gladiators fought for glory and survival. Roman law brought order, and Latin culture spread far and wide. Yet beneath this apparent strength, cracks were forming. Political corruption poisoned the Senate. Emperors rose and fell through assassination and intrigue. The military became more loyal to individual generals than to the state itself. Meanwhile, vast numbers of enslaved people and impoverished citizens weakened the social fabric of the empire. Wealth concentrated in the hands of a few, while the majority struggled to survive. At the same time, A new spiritual force was spreading quietly across the empire, Christianity. Born in Judea, this humble faith preached equality, compassion, and devotion to a single God. Despite persecution, it grew steadily among the poor, enslaved, and even some elites. Roman authorities saw it as a threat to their power and traditional gods, yet they could not stop its spread. Eventually, under Emperor Constantine, Christianity would be legalized, forever transforming the identity of the Roman world. To the east, the Parthian Empire faced its own decline. Constant warfare with Rome drained its resources, while internal divisions weakened central authority. From its ashes rose the Sasanian Empire, a renewed Persian power that sought to restore the glory of ancient Persia. The Sasanians built grand cities, promoted Zoroastrianism, and engaged in epic conflicts with Rome and later Byzantium. Their rivalry with Rome became one of the greatest geopolitical struggles of antiquity. In China, the mighty Han Dynasty, after centuries of dominance, began to crumble. Powerful warlords, court conspiracies, and massive peasant revolts, such as the Yellow Turban Rebellion, shattered imperial unity. The empire fractured into three rival kingdoms, plunging China into decades of war and chaos. The once unified land splintered, proving that even the most stable empire could collapse under internal pressure. Across Central Asia, nomadic peoples like the Xiongnu and later the Huns roamed the vast steppes. Fierce and mobile, they posed a constant threat to settled empires. Their movements would eventually send shockwaves across Eurasia, influencing the fall of both Chinese and Roman power. Entire populations were displaced, reshaping the demographic and political landscape of the ancient world. In India, after the fall of the Mauryan Empire, regional kingdoms emerged, leading to cultural and religious diversity. Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism flourished, while trade routes connected India to Rome, Persia, and Southeast Asia. Yet political unity faded, making the subcontinent vulnerable to future invasions. In the Mediterranean, Rome faced perhaps its greatest challenge, the so-called barbarian invasions. Germanic tribes such as the Visigoths, Vandals, and Ostrogoths crossed Roman borders in search of land, safety, and opportunity. Some were driven by pressure from the advancing Huns. In 410 CE, Rome itself was sacked by the Visigoths, a shocking event that symbolized the weakening of imperial authority. Later, in 476 CE, the last Western Roman emperor was overthrown, marking the official end of the Western Roman Empire. Yet the story of Rome did not end there. In the East, the Eastern Roman Empire, later known as the Byzantine Empire, survived and flourished for another 1,000 years. Centered in Constantinople, it preserved Greek and Roman knowledge, law, and culture while blending them with Christianity and Eastern traditions. Meanwhile, across Africa, powerful kingdoms such as Aksum rose to prominence. Aksum became a major trading empire, connecting Africa with Arabia, India, and the Mediterranean. It adopted Christianity early, becoming one of the first Christian states in history. As the ancient world reached its final chapter, a powerful realization emerged. Empires did not simply fall, they transformed. Their ideas, laws, religions, and cultures lived on, shaping the civilizations that would follow. The age of antiquity was ending, but the legacy of its greatest empires was far from forgotten. Their rise and fall had written the foundation of human history itself. The fall of the Western Roman Empire did not mark the end of civilization, but rather the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. As the dust of collapsing empires settled, a transformed world slowly emerged, shaped by the memories, achievements, failures, and lessons of antiquity. The greatest ancient empires were gone in their original form, yet their influence remained embedded in language, law, religion, architecture, and human thought. In Europe, the once unified Roman world fragmented into smaller kingdoms ruled by former barbarian tribes. Visigoths in Spain, Franks in Gaul, Ostrogoths in Italy, and Anglo-Saxons in Britain. Roads fell into disrepair, cities shrank, and centralized authority vanished. Yet Roman traditions did not disappear. The Christian Church preserved literacy, learning, and many aspects of Roman administration. Monasteries became centers of knowledge, copying ancient manuscripts that might otherwise have been lost forever. Latin continued to shape European languages, and Roman law influenced future legal systems. Meanwhile, in the Eastern Roman Byzantine Empire, imperial power endured. Constantinople stood as a shining bridge between Europe and Asia, its massive walls protecting a thriving metropolis filled with scholars, merchants, and artists. Emperor Justinian sought to restore the glory of Rome, reconquering parts of Italy and North Africa. His greatest legacy, the Corpus Juris Civilis, body of civil law, became the foundation of many modern legal systems. The magnificent Hagia Sophia symbolized the empire's religious and architectural brilliance. While the West entered the so-called Dark Ages, the East remained a beacon of civilization. To the east, the Sasanian Empire reached its zenith, rivaling Byzantium in power and sophistication. Persian kings ruled with grand ceremony, patronized art and science, and maintained vast trade networks linking China, India, and the Mediterranean. Their prolonged wars with Byzantium, however, drained both empires. These great powers weakened each other so severely that neither could withstand the dramatic new force that would soon emerge from the Arabian Peninsula. In Arabia, a revolutionary movement arose that would reshape the world more profoundly than any ancient empire before it: Islam. In the 7th century, Prophet Muhammad united the tribes of Arabia under a single faith, emphasizing justice, unity, and devotion to one God. After his death, the rapidly expanding Islamic Caliphate swept across the Middle East, North Africa, and Persia. Within a century, Muslim armies had conquered territories once ruled by Rome and Persia. Yet unlike many ancient conquerors, the Islamic world did not merely destroy, it preserved and expanded knowledge. Scholars translated Greek, Persian, and Indian texts, advancing mathematics, medicine, astronomy, and philosophy. Cities like Baghdad, Damascus, and Cordoba became centers of learning that would later inspire the European Renaissance. In China, after centuries of division following the fall of the Han Dynasty, the Sui, and then the Tang dynasties reunited the empire. The Tang era became one of the most brilliant periods in Chinese history, marked by poetry, art, innovation, and cosmopolitan culture. The Silk Road flourished once again, carrying ideas, religions, and goods across continents. Buddhism spread deeply into China, while Confucian principles guided governance. The cycle of rise and fall continued, but each dynasty built upon the legacy of those before it. In India, powerful new empires arose, including the Gupta Empire, often called India's Golden Age. Science, mathematics, literature, and art reached extraordinary heights. The concept of zero, advancements in astronomy, and stunning temple architecture emerged from this period. Trade connected India to Southeast Asia, spreading Hindu and Buddhist culture across the region. Yet political fragmentation eventually returned, demonstrating once more that no empire could maintain eternal dominance. Across Africa, kingdoms such as Aksum, Ghana, and later Mali and Songhai grew into wealthy trading powers. Gold, salt, and knowledge flowed across the Sahara, linking Africa with the wider world. The legacy of ancient Egyptian civilization lived on in Nubian and Ethiopian cultures, while Islamic influence blended with indigenous traditions. As centuries passed, the lessons of ancient empires echoed through history. People began to understand that power built solely on fear and conquest was fragile. Those empires that balanced strength with justice, diversity, and governance left the most enduring legacies. Roads, laws, languages, religions, and philosophies outlasted armies and walls. The story of the greatest ancient empires is ultimately not just a tale of war and destruction. It is a story of human ambition, creativity, faith, and resilience. From Mesopotamia to Rome, from Persia to China, from Egypt to India, each civilization contributed a vital piece to the foundation of the modern world. Today, when we walk through cities, study history, speak languages, or follow religions, we are still living in the shadow of these ancient giants. Their rise and fall shaped humanity's path, teaching us that greatness is temporary, but ideas are eternal. And so, the ancient world fades into memory, but its spirit lives on, carried forward by every generation that seeks to build, create, and understand. The end.